My story is Marianne. My hjord gan hjallag
Hello and welcome to Early Childhood Ireland's podcast, which features interviews and discussions on all issues relating to high quality in the early years and school age care sector. In our episodes, we've a range of speakers who are leaders in the areas that matter to Early Childhood Ireland members. This podcast series is proudly supported by Aricus Insurance, which offers a comprehensive range of cover at discounted premiums for both business and personal insurance products. So visit www.aricus.ie for more information. I'm Maura Corbett and I work with Early Childhood Ireland. I hope that by now many of our listeners will have had the opportunity to listen to the 10 beautiful lullabies and checked out the Educator e-learning resource recently launched by Early Childhood Ireland as part of Owlet. In this episode, following up on that episode where we introduced Owlet, I'm really delighted to be joined by a guest who has in-settings experience of using music and has been inspired by this to research and study more about the power of song and music with very young children. Leah Ahern de Leastar is a passionate and certainly multifaceted educator, blending, as I said, expertise in early childhood education, music and creativity. She has experience in various educational contexts. She's committed to fostering learning and creativity. Leah's journey reflects a dedication to continual learning, artistic expression, and nurturing potential from early years all the way through to adult education. She's passionate about providing quality third level education as a lecturer and a tutor, and she's currently working with the Progressive College in Dublin and UCC in Cork. Leah specialises in early learning and care, music education, and creativity. And in addition to her academic roles, she actively engages in the early childhood field, working in a preschool in East Cork. She performs professionally as a singer, and she provides expert consultation on voice health and educational services, including curating resources for early learning and care and music education. And as if all of that wasn't enough, she recently completed a Master's of Research exploring music integration in early year settings. Leah, you're really welcome. That is quite a CV I've gone through there. I'm really excited to talk to you today about music and creativity.
Thanks so much, Maura. It's lovely to be chatting with you today, and thanks for the great introduction there. You did great.
The first time I met you, it was in UCC last year, and I was struck by, your practical approach to using music with young children and how important it is. And I suppose when we chatted online about doing this podcast, you mentioned that idea of music as a universal language, and I really like that idea that even if you don't kind of read music, you can still understand music. We know what's being conveyed by the type of music that's being played. We can get a sense of what's behind it. And the idea of lullabies, as in the Owlet project, supporting early communication and music and so on. So, can you take us through your thoughts on that idea of music as a universal language and how it supports early communication?
Absolutely, yeah. And often, as you say there, sometimes when we get trapped in this idea of being able to play or being able to read, it can feel like a barrier. But music is a very universal thing. And we're all born with, I suppose, a predisposition to be musical. If you even think about accents and the way that we speak, it's quite a musical thing when we listen to it. And we can hear the ups and the downs and the tones and the intonations and the accents. It all comes together even when we speak. So when we bring that into a deeper context and I suppose use music in an intentional way, it can be an excellent way to universally communicate with everybody, and especially with very young babies. And as you say, music, it can convey a certain emotion or it can convey a particular idea. And this can be cross-cultural and it can affect all ages. And music can play a really large role, I suppose, in that early emotional expression, emotional recognition, in how we communicate. And it also then, even deeper than that, it can impact our cognitive development. It can help us understand different cultural contexts, physical development, and it can be a really inclusive activity as well from a very, very small age, which is great. And I suppose bringing lullabies into that, then often our first experiences as babies, and even more to this, our musical experiences, they are those moments of singing lullabies that might be accompanied by patting on the back, which is a very rhythmic musical activity. It could be swaying while or rocking while you're singing something. And this is a really amazing multisensory experience from this early age, because you're bringing in different senses. You're bringing in the auditory, you're bringing in tactile stimulation and visual stimulation as well. So it's a great universal language and universal activity that we can use to connect with very young babies and children. Even there's a lot of studies been done. I know Trehub has some work on this, looking at how newborns will even detect these changes in melody and rhythm, even at that newborn age. And the whole interactive nature of it as well can really strengthen the bond between baby and caregiver. And it can really encourage a baby to engage in their environment. So it's such a beneficial tool for us as caregivers, as parents, as if as practitioners and as educators to be able to use this.
Yeah, it's certainly very true that even if you don't speak the language that a baby is familiar with, your tone, the inflections of your voice and the way you hold them and move with them can convey that you want to soothe them. It's something to remember, because sometimes if you're working with children whose first language isn't your first language, you can feel a bit adrift. But there's a lot
Yeah.
you can do with, humming. I was listening to the lullabies from Owlette this morning, and they're just beautiful, and you're in no doubt as to what the purpose. I don't speak the languages that are in the lullabies, but they're to soothe, and they're to help babies contain emotions.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point as well. Like, even that you don't speak necessarily all of the languages that they're in, but you know the intention behind them. And just by the way they're sung, or by the way they're performed, I suppose. And as well, to not get too lost in that idea of that it's a performance, that it's a very natural thing that people naturally do to babies. And even I always think as well of, because I'm from Cork myself, the Cork accent is so up and down. And if you ever hear someone from Cork speaking to a baby, it's as if they're singing straight away. So I think it's just such an amazing tool to have. And it's something that we can always carry with us as well. We don't necessarily need other equipment. We can have it with us at all times. And, just to really think about the lullaby aspect of it, the whole art of singing as well. Sometimes we think of it maybe as a form of kind of entertainment, but the whole communicative aspect of it as well is so important. And it's really amazing at that early age, because like you're saying there, that you can really understand what someone might mean, or the emotion that they're trying to convey, just by the way that they're singing. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to know what they're singing. We don't need to understand the words, but it has that beautiful connection, I suppose, when we engage in singing.
It's interesting you mentioned the Cork accent, because when you spoke about accents first, I was going to say, the two of us being from Cork, we've particularly musical ones, but seeing as you brought it up a second time, I'll mention it.
Yeah, it's funny.
It really is. It's so musical, and so as a result, I think it's particularly easy to take off, which is why we get mocked a lot, isn't it?
I know. Yeah.
We can see really clearly that music supports early communication, and how useful it can be for educators working with very young children. Can you take us a bit more through, Leah, the foundations of music and infant development? what's involved there, and what's happening as children develop, and how's their understanding, appreciation, knowledge of music developing at that early stage.
Yeah, so I suppose even to just think of it as early development, it's a very rapid process. And music is a really good tool and resource to, I suppose, enhance the process of development. There's been a lot of studies been done, using like brain imaging technology like MRI and things like that. And it does show that having early exposure to music can really influence the auditory cortex. And this can really help us to process sounds and I suppose discriminate between different types of sounds. And it can encourage memory as well. And through these early experiences, we're also enhancing our motor control as well. So there's a very, I suppose, multi-dimensional aspect to this early development when we're thinking about it through a musical context. Because there's so many different areas, I suppose, of the brain being activated when we're listening to music. So there's a lot of elements as well, like about neural plasticity and things like myelination, which wouldn't be my complete area of expertise. But when we're looking at it at this early age, I've done quite a bit of research into this area, I suppose. And what this does is it can help to have efficient communication within the brain. So it kind of is brought back to the whole repetitiveness and predictable structure that music has. This can really encourage that communication to be supported. And there's lots of different studies that support this, and also support the idea that young children, as young as newborns, will have this predisposition to respond to music. And I suppose if we think about it in the various aspects, of development, like emotionally, it can encourage, pleasure, and it can encourage comfort of a child. I suppose the soothing nature that a lullaby would have for our language, as I spoke a little bit there about communication. Rhythm and melody within music can encourage language development. And again, it can help us discriminate between the different type of phonetics and different types of sounds. And as I said, it can encourage the processing element. And then cognitively, we have the idea of it helps us to learn patterns. So it helps us to recognize that there's repeating patterns that will occur. And this can help in a lot of our skills, such as like thinking and reasoning, which a lot of that would be very connected to IQ tests, and things like that, and spatial temporal reasoning as well. So this can all be affected for our attention, our memory, and different brain functions as well. And then physically, we're encouraging movement, we're encouraging motor skills. And of course, then finally, socially, it will encourage, emotional responses, and it can evoke emotional responses as well, and encourage bonding within children. And as children develop, then, we'll see that they'll lean more to particular styles of music. They'll show preferences. At the start, it can be quite a reflexive thing that they'll naturally have a reflex to respond to music. But as this grows, it'll be more intentional, and they become, I suppose, more active participants within music use.
And I suppose the music that they're familiar with in the home would play a part in their emerging preferences as well, wouldn't it? So it's important for
Absolutely.
educators, is it, to be aware of and in conversation with parents around kind of music that's listened to at home or used at home, not even listened to.
Yeah, like where you'd see a lot of that, it can be really helpful to make connections with home if we know maybe particular across different cultures and different preferences. What do the children enjoy? What does the child lean more towards? And then on the flip side of that as well, as an educator or a practitioner or a caregiver, to expose children to lots of different types of music as well, so that they can explore different sounds and be familiar with different sounds and be able to, I suppose, have their own choice and agency over the types of things that they like. This can be really helpful because, it's even as adults, we'll do this, we'll get used to the same set of songs, and that's kind of what we lean to. But it's nice to change it up and to give a wide range of different types of music for the child to be able to engage with.
And we're never too old to do that. That reminds me, I was on a flight beside an elderly gentleman couple of months ago, and I was listening. It was around the time that there was all the furore around the Taylor Swift ticket sales, and I said, haven't heard too much Taylor Swift stuff. I listened to that. So I was listening to that playlist, and next thing, this elderly man gave me a little jig, and he said, "Is that the one there's all the fuss about at the moment?" I said, "It is." And next thing, he was listening too. So here were the two of us on the long flight becoming Taylor Swift fans.
Yeah, and
So
sometimes it's just when you haven't engaged in something, so you haven't given yourself the chance. And a lot of the time, that's kind of the reason that certain genres of music might seem a little bit less accessible, things like jazz and classical music, because it's less likely that it might be just on in the background. It's a lot of the time what's on in the car, what's on the radio, on the background of television shows. That's what we're hearing a lot of. So, giving us ourselves and newborns and babies and infants, and as they grow through childhood, that space to explore different types of music can be just so beneficial to open their ears to the different styles and genres that are available.
And, on an everyday basis, then, Leah, in settings, can you take us through how music can be used to support different aspects of the day of a young child in a setting, from, I suppose, I call it the intentional use of music rather than music just being on in the background, that it's considered what music you are, what or how you use music at a given time of the day, throughout the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will look different for every child and every family and every setting. But having that intentional use can just be really beneficial when we really just are thinking about what music are we offering? Why are we maybe choosing this? Just being a little bit intentional about it can be really beneficial. And there's so many benefits of using music in both that unintentional way and intentional way. Like having music within our routines, it can support self-regulation, and it can really help with behavioral organization within infants. And a big part that I find it's so helpful for is it can signal different times of the day. And this can really help with transitions and, again, establishing that predictable pattern, which all will encourage, a sense of security within the infant. And again, because we've said there how music can encourage the various domains of development, it can encourage language development, social interaction, and have that source of joy and entertainment. And this will support the baby's routine as well. This can be really, really helpful. But having that, the inherent structure that music will give us and that predictability, I think that's such a beneficial way of giving that sense of security. And it's something I'm really passionate about within my own practice, having these musical routines that will encourage learning, encourage patterns within the day, help them prepare for different events, different transitions, and giving that sense of a stable environment. And even when we take it, to the idea of what narrative is there in the different lullabies, different nursery rhymes that we're using, are we encouraging different vocabulary, different sounds, which can help with even speech development? So being intentional about what we're choosing and being aware of how we can incorporate can be just wondrous in within early years contexts. And even, just encouraging ourselves to engage in singing where we can, to encourage clapping, tapping, rocking, any movement with singing. This is all beneficial. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of bringing that to the forefront, I suppose, and being intentional about using it. And again, it can encourage a sense of calm and comfort within an earlier setting or within the home setting. Even using music with slow tempos or soft kind of dynamics, soft volumes. This can be, really underpin a nice environment for the child as well. And using simple, predictable melodies and rhythmic repetition, all of that's very soothing for the child. There's actually been a study as well showing that when we engage in singing to an infant, it releases oxytocin for us as the singer or whoever is singing the lullaby, and also for the baby. And that's that cuddle hormone, and it can decrease stress and it can promote bonding as well. So there's a lot of studies that are available that really underpin this music use or use of lullabies, use of singing within the routine of a baby or infant or young child.
And, that continues right up. Older children are sleeping less, but I think music can still be used to signify a transition that's coming, or the routine, as in the order in which things happen, not a structure, the time at which it happens. That continues all the way up along, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Like I'm working at the moment with, aged kind of 3, 4, 5-year-olds, and even still, like, certain songs will signify certain things. If I start singing the cleanup song, they know, oh, I think it's, we're tidying up now and it's going to be snack time right after this, or it's going to be circle time or whatever. They really start to connect certain songs with different times of the day. Even at the end of the day, they'll know when the music that we use for kind of a movement break is coming to the end, and they know, okay, my mommy or daddy is going to be coming down the hill to collect me now any minute, so it really can instill the order in what's happening, and also can encourage the transition, that it gives them a chance to kind of prepare themselves for what's going to happen next as well.
And again, that link to home, using music that's familiar to the children can, like we've said, convey that respect for different families, cultures, and heritages and preferences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it creates a really nice sense of welcome as well within a setting. When there's things that we recognize, it can just ease the fear of the unknown a little bit for the children in your setting, at whatever age that might be. Even if it's a familiar lullaby that maybe, the parent has said they really like this when they want to kind of wind down, and bringing all that together, it can just really enforce and, I suppose, support a lot of what's underpinned to us within Aistir and Síolta, and it can support what we have in our policies in terms of inclusion, diversity, and then belonging as well on the other side of that as well. So I think it's a really, really useful tool to support best practice.
I'm a big fan of the idea of process, not product, and that it's not about the end product. But if there's somebody listening to this podcast and they say, I can't sing. Now, I personally believe, we're all better singers maybe than we think we are, but because of policies in schools around choirs, and that music was only for the people who were good at it, and that sometimes we have this idea that we're not able to sing, and certainly a lot of people aren't able to play an instrument. What would you say to encourage them to give it a try, and that it really is more about the process, not the product? That, nobody is expecting you to be a Taylor Swift or Carol O'Sullivan or whatever, depending what genre you're into.
Absolutely. And this can be the area where us as practitioners, I suppose, can need support. The biggest thing I'd say is, I suppose, really just lean into it is the biggest thing. Don't be afraid to do it. But that's very, very vague guidance, I suppose. Where I found the most comfortable that I've been able to get is to be really comfortable with your co-workers, because a lot of the time we're not nervous of singing in front of the children. It's when we're working with other adults that we're going, oh, I don't want to sing that now, or I don't want to do that. So having that really good bond with your co-workers can be beneficial. Also, once a child gets a little bit older, they'll be joining in with you as well. So, just leaning into it. But it's really important to not think about the end result. The beneficial element of singing and music use is really in the act of doing it. It's not, oh, well, I know 5 songs off by heart, so I'm great. It's the benefits that we're seeing are all in the act of engaging with music. So being able to just engage with it in whatever way that you can is going to have benefits within your setting or for the children in your care as well. And it's something I do feel really passionate about, giving educators that support and confidence to go out and do it. And I think it should be something that's really integrated in our training as early years educators, as well, as it's quite a performative task and it can be very daunting. But if you're engaging with it, just keep going, and, don't be afraid of the product, as we say at the end. Just think about the benefits of the process. And that goes for, with children as well. There's a really good TED talk by Victor Wooten, and he explores the musical growth of children, and he relates it to language acquisition. And it's this idea that, we don't just start speaking language once we're really good at it. We're speaking language as we go, and we're speaking with people our own age, we're speaking with other babies, we're speaking with other adults, we're speaking with people of varying abilities. And that should be the same idea with music as well. Don't be afraid to only, be on the same level as someone who you feel matches your ability. We should encourage children to explore and create music. And to take a musical term would be to jam with other musicians. That could be in a pre-recorded context, encouraging the use of pre-recorded music in the setting. It could be inviting, if you had a parent who might be a musician or something, inviting them into the setting to maybe explore music in that context. To think about it in the wider context, I suppose, is really important, rather than something, it's not something that we're just doing once a week, I suppose, to try and weave it through the day as much as you can and as much as that's possible for you.
Love that idea of jamming, and that we're not perfectly formed in terms of our language development. And I suppose everybody can hum. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you hum, it can be a start and help to break the ice.
Yeah.
And you make a really, really good point about maybe it being the other adults in the room being more intimidating, in air quotes, than the children. The children are far less critical, we feel, certainly anyway, than
Yes.
our colleagues.
Yeah, sometimes anyway. Sometimes they might say, "Oh, I don't like that song," so.
Yeah, but
But
if it's a song they don't like, they won't say, "I don't like the way you sing it."
exactly. And even as well, going back to basics, like things like tapping on a baby's back, while there's music on, or swaying or rocking, like those are all musical activities as well. It's not just we don't have to just lean on the act of singing. Like singing is an amazing tool, but there's lots of other things that we can maybe start off with and gradually grow this to singing. And as a baby will grow as well, like their appreciation for music and their participation as well will grow too. So at the start, as I said earlier, it's kind of a natural reflex, but as we go on, the things that they will want to do and that they will choose to do will be much more intentional. And they can, when we are bringing in the voice of the child, then as well, we can listen to that and bring that into our practice to really create this lovely emergent curriculum, an emergent space where they have a choice in what they're doing, and they can help us to inform our practice and inform what we want to offer as well within our practices. So it's important to really think about how we can involve their voice as well in the music use once they kind of can share that with you.
But that thing of the voice of the child, I suppose they're only really able to do that if they're given the opportunity. A bit like the jamming idea, that won't happen one day.
Yeah.
It has to evolve over time, and that giving them their voice and listening to it is part of the emergent process.
Absolutely.
Creating an environment where they know their voice is welcome and heard is really important.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important as well, like that from that really early stage, from very, very young, that you're introducing these kind of musical concepts in those kind of informal ways, the rocking, the swaying, the tapping, clapping, all of that. Encouraging them to engage in those activities with you can really grow as they begin to form their own opinions in that. And once they can understand that they can be involved as well and they can make decisions about it. So it's really important to have that from a very early age.
And I suppose at all stages of the daily routine, that it isn't just in the playroom. You can do this nappy changing, the lullabies, obviously sleep time, outdoors,
Yeah.
it can permeate the whole day, can't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And as you say, we don't have to overly structure it either, to bring it in as much as we can, where we can, in lots of different contexts. And that's how you're going to find the most benefits, when we're integrating it into our routines. And going back to that idea of language acquisition, we're using language all the time. If we can do that with music where we can, I know it's not as easy, but it can be just really beneficial, and it can make it easier as well for us then as the adults, because we're in the routine of using it too. So having that idea of integrating it as much as possible, I think, is really important.
Leah, thank you so much. There's so much there to think about and bring into practice. I really enjoyed the conversation and hearing about all the ways that music can develop connection, routines, the process being so important. There's so much there. Thank you so much, Leah. Really enjoyed that conversation.
Thank you, Maura. It was so lovely, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to this episode of Early Childhood Ireland's podcast, which is proudly supported by Aricus Insurance. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and spread the word to your friends and colleagues, and stay tuned for our next episode.